Welcome to the Sheets on Top podcast. This is a place where we talk to inspiring women and share their stories. Hi, I'm Jessica.
And I'm Tracy, and we are your hosts. What does it mean to be a woman in today's world? What does success look like? What does it feel like? Is there one definition?
We talk to women entrepreneurs and change makers about their ups and downs, their triumphs and failures, and how they define success.
We believe that every woman has a unique value and a story worth telling, and it's our great joy to share these stories with you. Today, we are so excited to bring you our conversation with Nikki Rausch. You're going to want to listen to this more than once. It's packed full of amazing tips you can immediately use to change the way that you do sales.
Nikki is the CEO and founder of the Sales Maven Society, which is an organization that she created, which is dedicated to authentic selling. What does that mean? She talks a lot about how to engage your customers and clients in conversation rather than just talking at them.
Nikki really understands the psychology of selling. And if you're like us and it's a part of the business that you really dread, especially me, Nikki can turn that around for you. We even brought her in to do a workshop with some of our members, and I just signed up for one of her courses.
She's a great storyteller too. Her tips are filled with these hilarious anecdotes from her life. It was so much fun learning from her that we've since become friends. It's our pleasure to introduce you to Nikki Rausch. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We are thrilled. We heard you last week on the podcast with Megan Walker, who's a friend of ours, and she has a podcast, Anthropology. So anybody watching, check it out because it's incredible. And we were enthralled. We must have listened to it a number of times. This is such a passionate topic for us. Before we get into our questions, but let's just learn a little bit about your background and how you created your company.
Well, my background is as a corporate sales, my career was a sales professional, and I worked in the technology space for many, many years. So I have 25 years of sales experience. In addition to that, I'm master certified practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming. If that's a new term to anybody listening, it's really the study of communication. And so let's see, back in about 2011, 2012, I started to get a sense that it felt like there should be something more fulfilling going on in my career, and I wasn't really sure what that meant. So I ended up leaving my corporate job, and in 2012, I went to work with my NLP teacher to help grow her business. And that's the first time I started networking with women. And as I was networking with these women and getting to know them, I just loved being around entrepreneurs. And I loved the idea that they were super passionate. They were making a difference in their communities and in their world. And I found that a lot of them were struggling to make money. And because they were struggling to make money, it kind of, when you kind of chunk it back a little bit, it was because they didn't understand the sales process. And sales for me at that point felt very second nature. And I started just helping some of them on the side, and they were getting great results. One in particular had pulled me aside and said, why are you not teaching women how to sell? And I said, well, who would ever pay me to teach people how to sell? That seems silly.
Hello.
So she really convinced me to give it a try. And my business was born out of that. And so I started Sales Maven in 2013. It has been the most amazing journey. And I'm having the time of my life teaching primarily women. I do work with some men, but primarily women, how to have effective sales conversations and how to move that place where you exchange, you get to the place where you exchange dollars for your service or your product. And it's been awesome. That's me. That's what I do.
Well, on that note, because I know Jess and I, we struggle with sales. Like, we love our platform, we love what we do, and we struggle. We were just talking before, like, can anybody sell? Like, we've talked about hiring someone to help us sell. Can anybody sell?
Yes, I think anybody can learn how to be effective in the conversation. One of the struggles, I think, oftentimes is that you maybe have witnessed how somebody else sells and you go, well, I could never do that. I could never talk like that. I could never say that, or that didn't feel comfortable. Well, that's the idea behind what I do. Isn't teaching you how to sell like me or teaching you how to sell like anybody else. It's teaching you how to be your authentic self and just be more strategic and effective in the conversation. understanding where you are in the sales process and then how to move somebody to this next step. And so, yes, is the answer to the question. Everybody can be effective at sales. It's just learning, it's building that muscle, that sales muscle. It's just building it up. That's it.
Yeah, I love that because I was thinking about it and I thought, it's kind of an epidemic, or Renee talks about this, for women and for people in general. Like, how do you get over your worthiness issues? Because even if they're not conscious, sometimes I think it's what's there. Because I know for myself, it's not about like, we love this platform. We love what we're doing. We're so passionate. You said that about women earlier. But if you were brought up that was kind of like, it's, you should have humility. It's not polite to push yourself forward. It's a struggle, right? Because I am great at amplifying other women. It's a struggle with myself because it's sort of like I was not brought up to do that.
Yeah. So I have two comments on that. So one, just to be really candid, I am an introvert and I was raised seriously by a misogynist. So I was raised to be very small and quiet and pleasant. And if I wasn't quiet and pleasant and just happy all the time, like as women, I think we hate when somebody, especially a man, says to us like, you should smile. You need to smile, right? That was the home I was raised in, that I needed to be pleasant and smile the whole time. So I get this idea, this concept. And so all of the things about my personality do not lend itself to what people usually think of when it comes to a salesperson. I fall to the introverted side. I'm quite shy, actually. And I was raised to think I have to be pleasant in order to get along in the world, right? So there's those kind of struggles. But the thing about the sales process that has really transformed it for me and for many people is that when you're selling, it actually isn't about you. It's more about the other person and their experience. And when you start focusing on the other person and the experience they're having with you, it takes a lot of the pressure off you. It takes a lot of the like, I'm worried what they're going to think about me. And am I being too big, or am I, being too bold or anything? No, it's because you're not even thinking about yourself anymore. You're really focused on, am I building rapport with this person? Do I have something that's going to meet a need for them or solve a problem? And all your job is to place it in front of them in a strategic way and allow for them to make a decision. So one of the things I love about the sales process is that it takes a lot of the focus off of me as the individual and puts it on them, their want, their need, their desire. And my job is to just make it easy for them to choose it or not.
Well, it's actually, I was listening to the podcast, and one thing I loved when you talked about you're not selling, you're issuing an invitation. Yeah. And I love that analogy. Could you just talk about that a little bit? Because I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah. So, the idea is about how important it is to ask for the sale. And it is important, but sometimes as women, we struggle to ask for anything. So I always like to think about the selling process as more as it's an invitation. And if you think about invitations, most of us like to be invited to things. Like, we like to be included. We definitely don't want to be excluded. And we like the ability to make a decision as to whether or not we want to accept an invitation. So if you start looking at the sales process, all it is offering somebody an invitation, and then they get to decide, yes, I would like to move forward, or no, it's okay. And it's not offensive if you're having a get together and you send out a bunch of invitations and people come back and say, oh, sorry, I'm busy that weekend, or, I can't make it this night because we have something else going on. Like, you don't take offense to that, right? It doesn't feel like they hate me because they already have plans. That's not what it's about. So when you think about the sales processes, all you're doing is issuing an invitation. It just allows for the other person to go, yes, I'd like to participate, or no. And either way is okay. And it's not personal.
I love that. It's so brilliant. It was funny. I was thinking about what you were saying a little bit earlier too. And one of the questions I had was, how do you get over unconscious bias? Because, Tracy and I had two platforms before this. We had another digital channel and we had another thing where we were a production company for videos. Often as women, we were pitching to men. And, hopefully it's getting better, but there were oftentimes Tracy was like, I think if we'd been men, we would have gotten that sale. Now that might be our own kind of mindset. But but you think, as it is a struggle, right? Again, when you're like, how am I being perceived? If I'm with men, am I supposed to be more aggressive? I mean, do women sell to men the same way they sell to each other?
I think it's a little bit less about women selling to women or women selling to men, and more about paying attention to the other person's style and their personality style. Because realistically, I mean, I'm sure you both heard this before. We do business, we buy from people we know, like, and trust, right? Mm-hmm. And when we're in conversation with somebody, people who we meet that we think have a similar style to us, like, we like people who are similar to us. We also think people who are similar to us are smart. Like, if you meet somebody like you, right? Yeah. So you meet somebody who's like you and you're like, I don't know where you've been all my life, but like, we're so in sync. You and I think alike, gosh, you're so smart, right? Like, so this idea about the sales process, when you are in conversation with somebody else, it's learning how to pay attention to their style and adding flexibility to your own behavior so that you put them at ease. So you send this message like, hey, we're alike. So if I'm selling to somebody who has a more kind of aggressive, more pointed type responses, or just the way they're behaving with me, my style is going to adjust to them. I will become more direct. I will become a little bit more pointed in my comments. And really, it's just about adding flexibility so that I put them at ease. So my all-time favorite quote is, "Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape."
Oh, I love that.
You do? Okay, good.
Yeah. That's brilliant.
So I like to think about flexibility in the sales process is, my job is to make it comfortable for the other person so they can make an educated decision. Yes, I'd like to work with Nikki, or not. And so you get to decide in the moment, how flexible do you really want to be? How much are you willing to adjust your style to meet somebody else? And can I give just a little tip about how to do this?
Yes. Oh, yes, please.
Okay. So this is one that you can do whether you're on the phone with somebody, if you're on a Zoom call with them, or if you're face to face. And one of the ways to add flexibility to your behavior to put the other person at ease is to pay attention to their rate of speech. Because we like people who talk at a similar rate of speech than we do. So if you meet somebody who's a really, really fast talker, they got a lot to say, it comes out really fast. Sometimes they don't even take a breath between sentences. Speed up. Because if you're like, well, let me tell you about, they're like, oh, too slow, lady. Speed it up.
I love that.
And the opposite is true. I actually did a introduction call with somebody yesterday, and she had a really soft, kind of slower rate of speech when she spoke. So I want to send the message that I'm willing to adjust to her, because my rate of speech is not slower. Like, I tend to fall towards the faster side of the rate of speech. So I just slowed down a little bit, and we had the best conversation. And what happens is, when you adjust to the other person, and just even rate of speech, again, you can do this on the phone. Anytime you're hearing somebody, you'll pick up their rate of speech. And if you're not sure what yours is, by the way, go listen to your voicemail, because you'll get an indicator of, are you a fast talker? Are you a slow talker? And whatever you are is perfect. It's just learning how to adjust the other person. But when you adjust to the other person, what will happen in the sales process is they'll be more open to staying in conversation with you longer. They will be more open to hearing your message, and they will also be more revealing about how to earn their business. Now, by the end of the call with the woman that I was talking to yesterday, and again, it was like an introductory call. It was actually an introduction that a friend made. So it wasn't going into it thinking like, oh, I'm going to earn her business. I was really just getting to know her and checking her out. But by the end of the call, she was like, so how would I work with you, Nikki? Because I'm willing to adjust. I'm not always trying, because if you show up in a conversation with any sales conversation, or frankly, any conversation in life, and you show up and you're like, hey, this is me, take it or leave it. The people who aren't like you will leave it.
If you're a woman entrepreneur looking to grow your business, we'd love to have you as a member of our community.
Here you can collaborate, network, cross-promote, and feel supported, whether it's a free expert workshop, a hike, or a Monday morning group meditation.
You can find all the details about membership in the notes, or you can go to our website at she'sontop.com.
You know, now something I find is like during COVID, we're not getting out. And so we can't meet people so much through networking, you know, and so it's more like doing the cold calls, right? So, you know, Jessica and I now, we've got to set, we're going to be launching a membership and we're going to be like sending out emails and letters. So when you do that cold calling or you send out a first email, are there any tips or tricks to get them to respond? You know, we send out so many emails, no one responds. Is there any magic around that?
Yes. So emails are,
Please give us the lowdown.
So emails are their own conversation. And there's a couple tips that I'll give. And I teach a class around this in my own membership. And actually I have a masterclass coming up here in just a couple weeks around email sequences. So I'm going to share some of the tips in there that will often repel people away from you or draw them to you. Okay. So one is you want to limit how many times you make I statements in your email. So I statements are things like, I want to tell you about this new membership that I have, and I want you to know this, and I want you to come join. Those are all talking about what you want to tell people. And that's, frankly, it's not interesting to a reader to use a lot of I statements. So instead, think about how can you tailor the message to the reader, because we write from our perspective, which totally makes sense. Like you have a thought, you type it out in your email, but that's not how the reader reads it. The reader reads it from their experience. So it needs to be written for them from their perspective. So instead of saying, I want to invite you, just say you're invited, because now it's about them.
Oh.
Right? And instead of saying, I want to tell you, just say, here's something you may not know, because that's about them. It's so much more interesting to a reader when you speak to them. And then one other little tip that I'll give around emails is we oftentimes, when we're sending out an email to our whole list, we write it as if our list is reading it as a group. So we go, hey, everybody. Hey, all of you all want to know this, right? Mm-hmm. But none of us read emails as a group. We all read them individually on our phone or on our computer. We don't sit around and say, hey, everybody, we got email. Let's all gather around and read it together. So make sure that when you're writing your emails, you're writing it to a person. Write it to a person. Okay, I'm going to give you, write it to a person. Okay, I'm going to give you one more tip. Can I give you one more?
Yes.
I love this stuff.
We're going to tell everybody about your platform at the end, because everybody's going to want to sign up. But any tips, awesome.
Okay, so another tip is, the thing about email is that it can often feel like you're talking at people, but sales is about conversation. So you need to talk with people, not at them. So one of the ways to talk with somebody is to ask questions. And you can ask questions even in an email, even with this idea of like, they may not actually respond, but our brains love questions. So if you can pose a question to somebody, instead of saying like, I know that you're thinking about X, Y, and Z, instead say, when's the last time you thought about X, Y, and Z? Whatever the question is, right? Now, even if they don't respond to you when they're reading it, their brain wants to answer the question. Now they're much more engaged with your content.
Oh my God, I love that. That's so brilliant. I'm like, I'm so
rethinking emails in my head right now.
The next question I had, we have a lot of solopreneurs, and I thought, is selling just selling? Or is there a difference between selling a product versus a service versus an ideology? Because we're kind of, we think of ourselves as a service, but also an ideology, a platform where we're expanding the voices of women. So, traditional selling a lot of times for other people is being like, you get this many clicks and this is how many followers I have. Whereas, for us, we feel like it's changing a bit. It's about being part of something, being connected with something, being, when you're working with corporate or whatever, it's not so much about the numbers anymore. Is that true? Or is that depending on what you're selling?
Well, I think when you're selling, one of the important things to always remember, whether you're selling to corporate, whether you're selling to an individual, or whether you're selling a service or a product, is you actually are selling to a person. Even at a corporate level, That person might have a business card that says, I'm the director of X, Y, and Z at this company, but they're still a person first. So think about that relationship and make sure you're selling to a person versus trying to treat them like an entity that won't have the same impact. Now, there are some differences in selling to corporate versus individuals, and there are some differences of selling product versus service, depending on how you sell. So that's maybe I would qualify my answer based on how you sell. Like if you're somebody who puts up a website and people can just come and order your product and you're, doing some Facebook ads and driving people to a product, there's some things you want to think about. One is the words that you choose are so crucial at that point, because all you have to work with is the words on the website that they land on, right? Like maybe you have a video, but even in the video, you have a very short attention span. So there's some things that you want to think about there. But when you are actually moving somebody through a sales process and you're having a conversation, there are some steps to take. And so like I teach a 5-step process. I wrote a book about this called The Selling Staircase. That's my 5-step process, and how it's your job to move clients from step to step to step. And when you get on a call with somebody for like a consult call, you're in this discovery step, which is step 3. And your job in the discovery is to ask the right questions, to lead people down this path to hiring you. It's a little bit harder to do that if you're selling a product and you're just selling it on a web page. It was kind of a long answer. I'm not sure if I...
No, it was great because there's so many. It's a hard question to answer in a small thing, but so you, it's great because obviously you have a service and a book where you can you obviously go into this in more detail. Is that what you were saying? Yeah. So it's like we really just want to introduce people to this, and we realized too, like Tracy and I were like, I'm like, I have 20 questions. And she's like, I have 20 questions. And we're like, okay, we have to have more than one conversation with you because it's just so interesting. We just, we love it. And I think it's a topic that every single woman can relate to because it's the biggest struggle. Some people love it, some people don't,
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we'd love to have you back again, ask more questions. And I'm definitely going to link below here to your website, your books and everything. But I said, one sort of last question is that, like, how do you deal with rejection? Because, you're sending out these cold call letters, when do you know how many to send out? When do you know, like, rejection is such a hard thing. When do you know when to keep pushing ahead and when to pull back?
Okay. So I will say about rejection that I think of sales and rejection as I think of getting a no, and I think of rejection as two different things. So this came up years ago where one of my really close friends was asking me some sales related questions and I was giving her some answers. And then she said, you know what makes you so good at sales, Nikki? And I love a compliment. So I was like all ears, like what makes me so good at sales? I couldn't wait to hear her answer. And she said, you are so good at rejection. And I was like, what? Hold up. Who's rejecting me? Like, what are you talking about? And she's like, when people say no to you. And I was like, oh, actually, I think of that very differently. So I teach some concepts around buying signals, and that when somebody gives you a buying signal, it's your job to invite them to this next step. And if they say like, oh, I was just asking a question, like it wasn't a true buying signal, I kind of equate that to the same as if I'm out having dinner and the waitress comes by and says, how was your meal? And you say, oh, it was great. I loved it. And she's like, would you like to see the dessert menu? And I say, I couldn't possibly. I'm so full, but thank you so much. Like, she doesn't go back behind the counter to her coworkers and be like, can you believe that lady? She rejected me. I tried to offer her dessert. So I think of when you're making an offer out to somebody and they go, thanks, no thanks. I don't take it personally. Oftentimes, if they're giving me buying signals, if they have indicated interest in some way, and I'm getting some buying signals, I'm issuing invitations, and they're still saying like, no, thanks, no thanks. I always say in my brain, I actually hear this in my head. It goes, not yet. I just haven't hit their convincer strategy yet, or I haven't answered some question for them. So I will stay in it when I say stay in it, I will stay in a sales conversation with somebody as long as they'll stay in it with me. But as soon as they start ghosting me, as soon as they start, don't contact me, I'll contact you. I go,
that's a real rejection.
Yeah.
I don't believe in chasing clients, and I won't chase clients. And so I always just say, hey, if something changes, if and when, please know I'd love to earn your business and you're welcome to reach out to me. And I do what I call bless and release. Like, I just think of like, I'm just blessing you, releasing you. I'm not going to chase you. I'm going to go focus on the people who want to buy from me. So if you're sending out offers and you're not getting responses to them, just think to yourself, if they're on your list, there's some reason they haven't unsubscribed yet. You just haven't made the right offer, or you just haven't touched their, convincer strategy, which a convincer strategy, by the way, we all have them. They're context specific. So in certain areas of your life, it might be a different number than in others. But a convincer strategy is that there's a certain number of times we have to say no before we say yes. Yeah. And so if somebody's sitting on your list, you just haven't hit their convincer strategy yet. It's okay. Continue to make offers.
I love that. I have one more personal question before we go, and this is a struggle because I don't want to go. I want to ask for a question, but just to keep, as we said, we're going to come back. Is there, you talked about, you're growing up and you're having sort of a little bit of a misogynist influence. Is there a woman in your life, like whether it was a teacher or a friend or somebody that you think of as a mentor, somebody that kind of celebrated and elevated you, like somebody that, that you look back and go, that woman made a difference in my life?
Oh, so many. So many.
Yeah.
Like I feel super blessed in the amount of mentors that I've had in my life. One was the one who really introduced me to neurolinguistic programming. And it was one of the biggest transformations or changes in my life as a result. Her name is Stacey Duray. And she was always she's a little bit older than me, but not that much. And she's been one of my best friends for many, many years. But at that point in my life, she was the woman that I aspired to be like. She could walk into the room. Everybody wanted to be her friend. She's so interesting. She's super charming. She's very smart. She's community minded. Like, she is the full package when it comes to a woman. And she's still in my life to this day. And I'm so blessed to have her. But she was the one who introduced me to neurolinguistic programming. And she's the one that really has been a cheerleader for me for many years.
Well, thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. And it was so amazing talking with you. We would love to talk with you more. And I think you mentioned something about an ebook.
Yes.
Before we go?
Yes. So for your listeners or your watchers, I would say listeners because I'm used to podcasts, but for your watchers.
How do people work with you?
Yeah. Well, okay. So how people work with me is I work with clients in kind of two key ways. I do private coaching with one-on-one. And then I have a membership site called the Sales Maven Society. That's where my training content is housed. There's a, private group where people get access to me for questions, and they get some bonus time with me when we get on Zoom together, and I do some trainings for them. So that's the Sales Maven Society. But for your watchers, the people who are watching this, if you would like to find out more, I have a gift for you, which is my ebook called Closing the Sale. And it has some specific language suggestions in it and how to lead somebody through that process. And so you can get that by going to yoursalesmaven.com/she's on top. All one word, she's on top. So yoursalesmaven.com/she's on top.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you for chatting us today. And we look forward to connecting with you in the very soon in the future.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this podcast, we'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to rate it and write a quick review, because that helps us get found. And of course, we'd love it if you'd subscribe.
To learn more about us and our amazing community, go to our website and sign up for our newsletter. And also follow us on Instagram at she's.on.top.
Thanks for listening.